All right, folks, welcome back to CrappieKast In Depth Series, Catching Crappie with and Without LiveScope. Episode 6, I'm Shane Jones.
John Farmer here.
John is on location in Pensacola. His wife has a conference going on down there, so John's enjoying the beach and the food and all that good stuff. So
Not so much a beach. I don't care for the sand.
he's down there, so he's doing it on location down there. I spoke with a guy earlier, and we're already talking about going over LiveScope and stuff like that. And he's like, "Hey, have y'all done a in-depth series on catching crappie without LiveScope?" And I said, "We've talked about it on the live before a few times." And John's really good at that, so I'm gonna let him kind of go in a scenario, you know, catching crappie without LiveScope. If you have side scan, if you don't, and how to find crappie and put together a pattern and hopefully make you more successful on the water. So. John, say the guy's got a bass tracker. He's got a 60 on it and trolling motor. He don't have any. He's got side scan. He's got a little Humminbird 9 in the back. He's got side scan and and he's got a good trolling motor and he's got some crappie rods with jigs on it. He's on a river that he's fished before. So let's put him in the water this fall and say, water temperatures in the 70s. We'll lay it all out there. It's a little cooler than it is right now, actually, but look. Just draw what you would do, John, with that setup, with that boat, because that is standard setup for people that don't have a lot of, a bunch of big equipment. But that is a standard boat.
I, Me personally, I'd start out with that side imaging. I'd get on a channel ledge, and I'd run a good stretch of channel ledge, and just try to catch those fish that are staged up on structure, maybe on the ledge. Some that are they're released during the day out on the flats and might come back to that structure. So I get on that channel edge on side image and I'll mark me some stuff. If I see it's a good mark on side imaging, at that point I'm gonna make sure I got a buoy I can throw. That's one of your best tools if you don't have that forward facing sonar. That's a scenario you just named. So I found something on side imaging after I ran down my channel edge or I went across a flat, whatever point, whatever area that they felt comfortable. They caught fish in that time of the year. At that point, I've marked it on side imaging. I'm gonna get my map lined up. I'm gonna run directly over that mark I just made. And when I do it, when I first see that mark come up, I'm on down imaging. I'm gonna throw that buoy whichever side my transducer is on, like mine's on the right side. I'm going to throw that buoy marker out the back of the boat. Hopefully, where it's going to land on that structure those fish are on. All right. Well, when I came over it with down imaging and I saw that structure and I saw where those fish were, it's going to show me the depth they're at. So I'm going to come in to that buoy marker I just threw, downwind or down current of it. I'm going to say those fish are at 8 feet. I'll throw past that buoy marker. I'm going to count down to about 7.5, 8. If I'm throwing a 16th somewhere in there, I'm going to start retrieving that jig. And I'm going to, if I catch a fish, same count. But I'm going to keep going until I either hit something and lose that jig. I'm going to go to the left of that marker. I'm going to go to the right of that marker. I'm going to go short of that marker. I'm going to go past it. I'm going to work all the way around it, just like it might be a piece of structure that's sticking up. I'm gonna work the whole thing like we used to have to do when we were guessing, where the fish were oriented with what we knew was there. That's the easiest way that I can tell somebody to do it. I got a picture on my phone this week of when I was spider rigging. I was pushing little rattle traps, below a piece of lead. And I just line up on one of my marks and that I'd made and run over it with those poles out the front. And, you catch those hot fish that and if you're not hanging that structure, then you're not fishing deep enough. In that scenario, we lose a lot less jigs and a lot less tackle now that we can see, that we're about to get that jig or that bait into that structure. So in a scenario where you're having to guess how deep you are or the cast you're making in there, you want to be losing some jigs. That way, hey, I'm finally getting down to where the fish are.
Yeah, you're saying 16th ounce jig on about 6 pound test to fall about a foot a second. That's where you're saying somewhere abouts.
If you throw it out there about 30 feet, then you ought to be. It might be a little bit less, and
Right.
then braid is going to be a little bit different than your fluorocarbon. So that 5 pound braid I throw, it might be 6 seconds, and that might be where I would start if it was 8 foot deep. That way, what you you can cover that water column, and the water's so clear right now. We've been in a drought where we're at. They can pick that bait up a lot sooner, and you a lot of times you want the fish to have to come get the bait instead of you putting it in his face, because a lot of times he gets a good running start on it, he's more likely to eat it.
Right.
If you put it where they can see it and they can come running up there and get it, it might be better than just rolling it across their nose. Sometimes
Right.
you got when it's real buddy.
Yeah, John and I both grew up beating brush down the bank, lay downs. People don't understand. You throw in a lay down and you count to 5 or 6 and you start reeling, you bump a limb, you come over that limb, boom, that crappie thumps that jig. You're like, oh, I was 5 or 6 foot deep. The old guy that taught me, he could always tell me how deep he was generally. He said, man, I'm 6 foot. Like, okay. And we always done that because we didn't have side scan. You didn't have a lot of down scan stuff. And, you can use that jig as a search bait too. You pick up a fish, that fish is not there by accident. I mean, it's just, trying to repeat that pattern like John's saying, he's saying the main channel edge. You look at John showed me a bunch of stuff over the years, stumps and blade downs. The stumps, what's crazy, the tree may be washed down the river or lake, but that stump's gonna be there till it gets washed out around. And John showed me a lot of fish, around those stumps, and that is a high target area this time of year, isn't it, John?
It is, and then you got those little pockets and things that look different on the map that we've talked about before, where you feel like people have put brush. Let your eyes start keying in on those things, and you'll start, say, oh, dang, there's that brush pile. And they talked about, it's right there in that little pocket, any little dip in the contour lines, or it's coming off this point. Somebody's put a brush on the back side of a point, on the downstream side of a point, anywhere around a point. Work all the way around that point looking, and you typically. Once you get, like a good example is like Tony Adams over at Lakeview Fall, Alabama. He seems to do some of the similar patterns when he puts out a pile of brush. And if you ever get where you can start thinking like Mr. Tony does, you can find a lot of stuff he puts out. And that happens on a lot of lakes. So if you find something in a certain water depth, and there's somebody that's out there putting out a lot of brush, if you'll start thinking, say, hey, I found that the same guy's putting out a bunch of stuff, I need to start looking in the same areas, and you can find a lot of what they put out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's successful in that certain area, inside the point, outside the point, and, channel swings next to the bank. There's a bunch of scenarios. And what's crazy, I fished with Rock several years ago, and he's a big cork jig fisherman, John, and he's like, man, I catch a lot of fish right here. And I had LiveScope, and I went up there, and as soon as I shined in there, I seen it was a cedar tree, and it was some movement going in on it, and the channel swung right there. So it's a perfect scenario. That's why he was catching fish there, because of that tree was in that channel right next to the bank. And, we caught a lot of fish. It was in October. LiveScope wasn't really showing you a lot because it was only 5 or 6 foot deep. But, a lot of people's asked me, hey, how I catch them without LiveScope and from the bank. And this time of year, John, you're going to be throwing what? Your monkey milks, your shag colored baits, your gray ghost. The water's so clear that it's hard to go against that color right now, isn't it?
Yeah. We talked about this last week. Steve from Limbs Tackle sent us some baits to the expo that were clear baits, but just had gold flake in them.
Mm-hmm.
Some with gold flake in them, some with silver flake in them. That gold flake is jam up. And it's just a clear plastic, but it's just got that gold flake in it. We've been doing pretty well with them.
Yeah, that's something for them fish just to hone in. Like John's saying, we'll get into the LiveScope. We're going to run about 15 minutes on without LiveScope, then we'll run about 15 minutes with it. We're just trying to help everybody out that's getting into it, and then people that want to buy a LiveScope and stuff. We're trying to help you guys out, and we're going to do an episode on what not to do. Like buy the wrong screen or a lot of stuff, because John and I bought them and had to sell them and upgraded and everything until. But we're going to get into that. But right now, we're just going to talk about, for the next 5 minutes or so, we've been about 10 minutes into it, catching fish without LiveScope. Your rod's the same, John. You're 6 foot, 6'6". Your 16th ounce jig. I mean, your casting rod. It's pretty much the same setup as anything, right?
Yeah, if I'm casting, that's going to be the case. If I want to go in and take somebody, slip bobber fishing or something like that, I like to use a 10, and just what I'm saying, just
yes.
I can flip it out there easy, drop a drop. I don't have to worry about the bead or the slide catching in the island. Because typically I'm gonna have that thing 8 foot or so. And it's real easy when you got one of those, when the cork slips down and your leg catches it. It's easy to just pendulum that thing out there and flip it or something.
Right. A lot of people I've learned, guiding people. A lot of people are accurate with an 8 and 10 foot rod than they are 6 footer. They can just, like you said, that 10 foot, they got that pendulum action. They just swing it out, let it drop. Even with just a regular crappie jig.
I tell you something else. If somebody's having trouble casting a short rod, and sometimes you can put like a 14 footer in their hand, you'd think that would really mess them up. But don't put that heavier lead on there. Just put them an 1/8 ounce jig on there, and they can just flip that 1/8 ounce out. You get them. I mean, you've got to get them 20 feet closer than you would like sometimes. But sometimes just that long pole, they can just kind of point it and flip it out there and make a more accurate throw than. Sometimes people aren't used to use a spinning reel. I've seen some of the craziest things with a spinning reel, like the most famous ones upside down.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you're right. I've had people that couldn't, cast very accurately, and these Zebco bullet reels and stuff. They've got some nice reels now. They've got several ball bearings in them, and man, you can just flick of the wrist and have. The thing is, even when you're not fishing with LiveScope, is to put it in there and be able to count it down and be comfortable and know where you are when you get that thump and try to repeat it. Is that not the biggest thing, John?
Absolutely. Putting it on target, not overcasting, things we talked about last week. That's a big thing. But when I don't know if I was clear about if you give them that 12 or 14 foot pole, or somebody that's having a problem with casting and getting it on something, don't, we talked about before putting that quarter or a half ounce of butter. Leave that off. Just put that 1/8 on there, and you can just kind of flip it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you can still get if you got that 15-pound fluorocarbon on there and you're throwing that 1/8, you can still, that heavier fluorocarbon is going to slow that jig down, so you can still get you a little bit of float even with an 1/8 ounce jig.
Right. Yeah. You can actually see all that, with LiveScope. The fall rate's about, you're right, slower. The 15-pound fluorocarbon, the 1/8, and it's all about getting somebody comfortable. And I've learned in that. The fellow I carried Saturday, I put a 13-foot rod in his hand. He swung it out there and fished, and he said that's what I'm used to doing, jigging and stuff. And he didn't really pay attention to LiveScope. He went by feel, and that's what that's one reason I wanted to kind of go out by this is. Go over this right here with catching without a LiveScope is just put guys, the guys fish from the bank, And
I tell you the easy, if you're fishing without LiveScope, the easiest thing to do is if you're fishing somewhere with a lot of bridges like Lake Gunnersville or somewhere like that, man, just where the bridges are, and you can jump from bridge to bridge. There's fish on those bridges about all the time. And then what people don't realize, some of these bridges, like on some of these smaller places, there's an old bridge there that's cut off under the water, and then you got the new bridge pilings. So you got two sets of structure there that you can fish. A lot of people don't realize that. Like I said, through the years they've had to rebuild the bridge. Well, they don't always just take the whole bridge out; they cut it off, and like I said, it makes a secondary structure to the bridge pilings.
Yeah, it's 30-second 4-pound line. You can hear everybody's rod just whipping it, guns because that jig's light and that line, and they're letting it fall slow and creeping it back. And for some reason, those Guntersville fish like slow and little. I mean, that's what those Guntersville fish like, slow and little baits, So I was talking to Tommy, and he's down in Florida. He was saying, hey, I'm side scanning these stumps, and I could see them, and then I just run them. I'm throwing a 30-second, just creeping that bait, like we said before, making that bait go through that school, and just maybe one of them just, run up and just suck it in. And now that's what he said he had to do to catch those fish. But we'll go over some LiveScope settings now. That first half of the show, hey, we went over some, without LiveScope. So we'll go over LiveScope now, John. There's a ton of people that are asking me, hey, I have trouble identifying fish, and describe to us what a crappie looks like, a 1.25 pound crappie on your LiveScope, John, because a lot of people can see them in brush piles when they're sitting there crawling around, or there's a school of them in there. But like, if you got a couple, 2 or 3 in the water, and they're sitting suspended, 10 or 12 foot deep, describe what their kind of shape is to these people.
To me, they just like more like a round ball, and they're going to be sitting a lot more still than the brim or the bass. That bass usually, he'll be active. He'll be coming around the stump, and so will the catfish too. And you can see on the screen, you can see their body will break in the middle. That's why you know that it's a longer fish, and it's swimming by breaking its body, or that crappie's just flicking that tail a couple times and gliding when it does move. But what you can tell is when the bigger the crappie is, you start getting to see some of the head details, like maybe the gill plate and stuff on a real big one.
Mm-hmm.
We get over 2 pounds. That's the little things you start to notice, like, hey, that right there is a good fish, something I want to chase around. And then in the spring, you can start seeing a shadow back behind the stomach when she's full of eggs. But typically, they're just more of a round profile than a lot of your trash fish and other fish that you run into.
Yeah, you're right. They're profile guys. You can't hardly see a big crappie's tail at all. I mean, their shape, because it's so stubby compared to their body, they're taller. And I hung a big one. When was it? Saturday. I was down in Miller's Ferry, and the big one was sitting. I told John, and I threw down there, and she come up and got my jig, and she come unbuttoned, but she was so distinctive. Like, when you see one, you're always, that may be one of them. And a lot of them suspect. John and I say it all the time. That fish is a little suspect. Let's throw at him. Throw at everything you think is suspect. It doesn't hurt to practice, guys, especially when you're live scoping. But John's saying that profile of that fish, that is absolutely correct, because
like kind of like a plate,
Yeah, to me it looked like a Dixie plate. You're exactly right. That is the best. And the first thing a lot of people do with LiveScope is bad habits from casting out. And before LiveScope, they click their bell too soon. They don't let the bait get down in the fish. And John can go into more detail. They click their bait swings. Starts swinging at the boat and goes over the fish. Don't really get the fish's attention. Don't ever get, especially if it's just one individual fish on a stump, or you've got to get that bait down there by them and then take it away from them. John showed me a lot of fish here lately that's like him and Jonathan saying birthing a crappie from a stump, because the stump's just glowing, and you bring your bait walking it over that stump, and all of a sudden you see a head rear up. It's a big old black crappie 90% of the time, and he'll shoot out of there and you take it away from him, and boom. I mean, we're going to try to do some more videos, guys, with showing our LiveScope screens, because a lot of people, they can hear it, hear us talking about it and see the back of our heads and all that stuff. But I'm going to try to zoom in, on the screen. And especially if I get an opportunity to fish with John, I'm just going to narrate what he's doing. Even a laser pointer, I'll be like, hey, there's the crappie, that will really help people pick up on stuff. But as far as settings, John, on LiveScope, you can just say what the settings are, your basic settings, and we share them all the time. And then you kind of go ahead.
I was kind of stuck for a while on one thing, and I in the past year I've moved away from. So I used to, my noise reject I always kept on high, and I don't know what it is about it, but when I got that LVS 34, when I'm running high, it seemed like I had just a tiny bit of lag. Like I would feel that bite, and I would see it just a split second after it on the screen. And I don't know. And so I talked to some friends of ours, and they said, "Yeah, bump your noise reject down." So now I'm fishing with it on medium all the time, and I've always gone with the TVG off. That's just what I've done from the start. There might be some advantages when you get deeper. I've heard people putting it on low, on deep when they mess with deeper fish. But me personally, I've always gone TVG all. Um, my appearance is that green, but it's called black emerald, and it's just I've been with it for years, and Jessica and I are comfortable with it. I'm sure that the other, Shane runs a different palette than I do, and he'll go over there here in just a second. But that's what we're comfortable with. When you go into appearance, you can manipulate your color palette, but then you also can go into color gain. And I typically run my color gain about 83 to 85%. And it seems like to me that intensifies that jig a little bit more, or other things that you're pointing at. The color limit came along, I guess it's been about 18 months, 2 years now, color limit, something like that. I know there was a March Grenada tournament right before it came out, and it messed a lot of people up because they
Yes, it did.
including me. But anyway, so
yes, it did.
color limit I put on default, which in my mind is 0. And then my regular gain, depending on water clarity, some lakes it's just weird. Some lakes will let you run it differently. I mean, you can run some lakes, you can get it really hot, but I'm typically between 58 and 71 on my regular gain. And the hotter you can get away with running that gain, the more your jig is going to glow. You know what I'm saying? The hotter it's going to be. And like I said, it's just depending on clarity and depending on the lake you're on. Some people want that screen just clean with no clutter or no particulate in it. That doesn't bother me. I want it as hot as I can get it. And so my fish are going to glow well and my jig's going to glow well.
Yeah, you're right. I run the blue palette, guys. My eyes pick it up. I can fish with that black emerald. I fish with John. The blue I pick up a little quicker with my eyes. You have to pick a palette you get used to. And as far as your insulation depth, John, are you going 1 foot or you go with 0? A lot of people run 1 foot. As far as insulation in the setup, what are you running?
On 0.
Yeah, yours is on 0. Tell people why you're running on 0, because it's a big tip, guy, big time tip.
So I got on 0 because I feel like I can see my jig splash easier when it hits the water. What that is, you're telling that transducer that it's installed at a certain depth. So I put it at 0. In my mind, it's like I want to see that jig from the time it hits the water, and I want to be able to track it the whole time that's in the water. And so, like, you go somewhere like Grenada, or in many places, those big girls, they'll come up and they'll be sunning. They're like 2 foot under the surface. You're gonna need to pick that jig up just as soon as you slip it off in the water. And sometimes, that doesn't happen. Now when we had the 32s, you could roll that transducer up a click and get a little bit higher look. But with a 34, that's not really an option because you've only got 3 clicks that you can adjust the LVS 34.
Right. I remember that, especially when you're carrying people fishing. It's hard if they'll start casting, you say, hey man, throw 25 feet, the fish is at 20, and that jig splashes, guys, you can track that jig so fast, it gives them people time to walk their jig to that fish. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but the LiveScope shows you everything you do right and wrong. I mean, I learned a bunch of bad habits I had of clicking the bell too early, or letting the bait get below the fish. And John's real big on this, and it is 100% the truth, guys. When that fish comes off with your bait and he addresses that bait and his rear end just drops, you'll see his tail start quivering. If you ever flatten that fish out by slowing down your bait and not taking away from him, his feed switch goes slap off. It's crazy, and then they'll just dart back and go right back. So a lot of people I carry fishing, they want to reel it. When the fish comes off, they want to stop it and let him eat it. I say, hey buddy, that fish has no trouble eating your bait. Just, John, hey, keep reeling. That's all it sounds like you're being ugly to the person, but hey man, keep that bait moving. Let's go. And that's what you got to do as far as LiveScope. And then you're like, oh, it's a cat and mouse game. Like John's always told me, it's got to be a cat and mouse game, or they're just not in. Sometimes they'll come right off the pile, boom, hit it before you can even get going. But we caught some Sunday. I literally had to let it float down to the root ball, twitch it a couple times, and woman started dressing it, come out, and I just ease it away from him. He'd come out, whoop, grab it. I mean, it's crazy watching them do it, but that's what you got to learn to be able to splash, track your bait, walk it down to the root ball, and take it away from those fish. And you'll start popping fish and making a pattern.
You got to figure out which way to make them the most excited and mad. And sometimes it's, he's coming, he's just falling. If you'll burn it just a little bit, it might make him catch another gear. Sometimes I might take my thumb, and while I'm reeling and the fish is falling, I might just start tapping real fast and speeding up at the same time, and it just makes them catch another gear. But you got when you get to a certain depth, you're gonna run out of water. You know what I'm saying?
And I've had it exactly right. Yeah, I've had them busted right at the top of the water. I mean, you're just like crazy stuff. And like John, so we were discussing the other day, we're talking about going south, going fishing, and right now the fish are kind of being picky. And John said, I'm going to wait a little bit till they're not so picky, where they're so aggressive guys that they're just, there's a couple in that pile that they're just mad at that jig. I mean, and that's the fun fish to catch.
Another thing to be, to keep in your mind, the closer you get the fish to the boat, if you're fishing with braid, you're giving him all of it. There's no stretch in that. The closer you get that fish to the boat, you need to, don't try to rip his lips off if he's 3 feet from the boat.
Yeah, lean back on. Yeah, that's exactly right.
You have to pop back just a little bit, and because that braid, it's giving him, it's going to be ripping lips at 2 feet, 3 feet, And if one does fall and it stops there at 2 or 3 feet from the boat, sometimes, hey, I'll stop with him and just see what he wants to do. Sometimes he'll tail up and look at it, and go ahead and eat. But the majority of the time, when they quit right in that range, they're gonna turn around and go back.
Right, it's crazy. I've had people in the boat with me. We're throwing at stumps, and I show her to throw them. I reel mine up, and I've got my jig hanging in the water. They'll throw by the stump, and the fish take off, and gets to the boat, and I've got my jig hanging there, like John was saying, and he slaps the mess out of my jig, and I've just got it hanging there like you would be trolling. John said, hey, kill that bait. I mean, like John was saying, fishing with LiveScope, when you got 2 people, the first guy goes over the pile, the next guy throws behind him, and John said, hey, man, stop your bait right when you get to the pile, because they came out a little bit and went back. And he's kind of telling me, hey, you're doing something different till you figure out what the fish want out of that. And it's different from school to school, is it not, John?
It is. And the last thing I'll typically do is I'll get that bait right in the pile. I mean, if they hadn't done anything else, and we about burnt the pile, got everything we think's active off of it, I'll bring that jig in there and I'll just pop it. Make it go 18 inches, flutter, pop again. And sometimes you'll catch one of those fish that you necessarily didn't get them the right way in the beginning. But the worst thing you want to do is booger a pile up by hanging it. So start up high. Yeah,
exactly.
It's like hooking the feed sack mullet fish.
Yeah, I mean, John, hey, these are great tips, guys, and we're trying to share information that you typically don't hear, and we're trying to, and we're going to take suggestions from you, just like we are in this show right here. And we got different topics, and you guys can help us. Y'all help us big time on the live, because people ask questions, and man, we can run with it. We try to keep these 30 minutes or so, and just give you general information. And John and I really just generally talk about, hey, what we're going to talk about, and we'll just run with it that day. But I hope like I said, we're getting a lot of feedback. And I know John is, and myself, we're getting a ton of feedback from you guys, and we really appreciate it. I mean, somebody new every day say, hey, man, we caught you on Apple Podcasts, or we caught you on the live, and thank you, man. We're catching more fish and enjoying it, and that's what drives John and I to keep on putting these things out, man. But like John's going to tell you the same as me. Hey, message me, text me if you got any questions that we don't talk about. Isn't that right, John?
Absolutely. Hey, Thursday we're gonna have the MBT Marine.
Yeah, yeah. I know it's next Thursday. I think he's next Thursday. He told me where it was going to be. I forget he was going to be out of town, but I don't know who we'll have on Thursday. We can have somebody. We tried to have Jonathan and White, and it kind of had some technical difficulties, but I don't know, we got a couple of days. We might talk about getting somebody on there and
probably ought to talk to Dooley. You know, he fished that national championship, the Crappie.
Yeah, we can get Ryan Dooley. He was talking about today when I asked an opinion about doing the video and the screen, just a screen only and kind of just narrating it, you know, just like John and I do here. We're trying to draw you a picture, you know, what the fish are doing without you seeing our hand movements and stuff like that. But we're not going to keep this thing any longer. We know we're not trying to draw it out, and we want to keep everything fresh and keep your attention. And John came with great tips again. Like, you ain't hearing that anywhere. I don't care what you say. Those tips you're not going to generally hear. And John's on Facebook, Tom Sawyer YouTube.
Yep. Tom Sawyer Crappie Fishing YouTube. I got a great footage from a trip Greg Hammett and I did. I got to edit it.
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize how aggravating that editing can be.
It can be. The good thing is, guys, believe it or not, these shows we do right here, we're not editing nothing. I'm putting them on there. There's a lot of oohs, ahs, and stuff like that, and it's not as professional as some you may hear, but hey, we're real folks, and we're real crappie fishermen. We make mistakes, and we have fun, and we're going to keep on doing this as long as we get feedback from you guys. But we're going to end the show. Thanks again, John, as always. You be careful down in Pensacola, man, and hang out, and y'all have some fun, and we're going to get ready for Thursday's live, Thursday, 7 p.m. See if you can get in touch with Ryan Dooley. Let's see if we can get him on here. I know if he's free, we'll get him on here and let him talk about Grenada and what they had to do to catch those fish. And I know he's in Missouri, so I know the fishing's about to get good up there. But appreciate your suggestion, guys, all the time. Apple Podcast, Spotify, CrappieKast Live on Shane Jones Fishing. Like I said, you type in CrappieKast right now anywhere in Safari, and you're going to see mine and John's mug somewhere in there, I promise you. And Jessica, excuse me. But, man, we appreciate it, man. Y'all tune in. Give us some feedback. Y'all give us reviews on the podcast stuff, man. That helps it out tremendously, gets it rolling. We're almost at 1,000 downloads now. I looked, it was a 987 before we started the show. So, appreciate you guys. Appreciate it, Johnny.
All right, bud.